Hey everyone, welcome to the Captain Drone YouTube channel. My name is Steve and this thing in my hand would be the DJI Neo and I am going to fly it here FPV style. And I just realized I have the wrong hat on because when you fly or use DJI products you have to be a DJI fanboy of sorts. So look at this, I have a DJI hat. Not a great one, but I have a hat. So to fly FPV style you're going to need DJI Goggles 3, which I have here. You're going to need the DJI Remote 3, and it's a good idea if you want to fly it in manual mode, make sure you loosen your left joystick so it falls to the bottom, so like you're in the real FPV drone hobby. And I also have the Motion Controller 3, which is a lot of fun to fly a drone with. So let's go fly. Now we're all ready to take off. Let me show you my camera settings. Here's what I see in my FPV goggles. I'm going to go down to the settings menu, then over to the camera menu. I'm shooting at an aspect ratio of 16:9. I've got the video set to 4K 30 frames per second. Maybe later I'll change it to 1080p 60, but for now I'll leave it at 4K 30. Also I have Rocksteady turned on. For the first flight, I'll use the DJI FPV Remote 3 and I'm going to begin in normal mode. Then I'll fly for a bit, switch to sport mode, then I'll fly for a bit and switch to manual mode. To start the motors on the Neo, pull the joysticks down and out, then push the left joystick forward until the Neo rises off the ground. In my goggles, it shows I'm flying in normal mode. Also, the height and distance is also shown. Now, DJI normal mode is another way of saying beginner mode, so all minis and Mavics, as well as the FPV drones, all have normal mode, which is essentially designed for beginners. The drone does all the flying, and that's how I flew it really close to my head right there without crashing into me. Now, I want to point out that when you're looking through the goggles, at least the way I have it set up, there is no image stabilization. So as you see me flying here, this is the view in my goggles, it looks like it's rocking side to side, but let me switch to what the camera sees. You can see when I switch over to the camera view, the image is slightly zoomed in, and that is because we have image stabilization. So image stabilization crops in your image so that it can keep everything stable. So now it's time to switch over to sport mode and let's see how this baby reacts. Have a look at the lower left of my FPV goggle screen and it changes from N to S. Sport mode will increase the angle of attack of the Neo. In other words, it's going to let you fly faster, and when you take corners, even when you have stabilization on, you can see it's banking in the image here. I'm trying to follow this bird around. I apologize in advance to all the bird lovers out there, but I did keep my distance from the bird, so not to freak it out too much. I was just doing this as a demo to show that in sport mode, you know, you get some speed and you can track something as long as the thing you're tracking is not moving up and down. In sport mode, you can't track really fast up and down, but you can track from side to side as I'm doing here on a level playing field. Now, as your skills in sport mode increase, you can fly lower to the ground and fly through objects, which looks pretty cool, especially at speed. Next, it's time to try out manual mode. Have a look at the lower left of my FPV screen and you'll see the S change to an M. In addition, your camera moves upwards 15 degrees because the angle of attack of the drone is going to be increased with the nose pointing slightly downwards. Manual mode will only be engaged if you can get your joysticks into the green bars. Now I've switched to manual mode, so the Neo is no longer flying itself. This is why manual mode is not for beginners or even intermediate pilots. You really need to know what you're doing if you're going to fly in manual mode because you have 100% full control of the Neo. So now, how does the Neo handle as an FPV drone? Well, let me tell you, it handles terribly. It is not a very good FPV drone. For example, if you attempt to turn by banking, it doesn't bank. If you try a roll, you can do it, but it's rather clumsy. And forward and backward flips are not much better. So unless DJI comes out with an update for the tuning of this drone, currently I don't recommend it as a good FPV drone in manual mode. I've got 2 lights of battery power left after that flight, so I'm going to take it for another flight. I'm going to change the resolution to 1080p. I want to see what it looks like, 1080p 60 frames per second. I also want to see what happens if it runs out of power. Does it just go in the GPS mode when you're flying in manual mode? Does it fly back? So we'll see that. Alright, so back in the camera settings, let's change the video resolution to 1080p 60. And we're going to take off in manual mode, so that means we have to double tap the start button twice to start the motors. Then it's just a matter of lifting the left joystick and whoa, this thing's all over the place when taking off in manual mode. Alright, so I'm going to switch over to the camera view so you can see the resolution at 1080p 60 frames per second. Here we go. Well, I will admit it's better than I was expecting. Yeah, you know, there's detail in the image. Everything looks really good. Now, this is me flying in manual mode, and look at, you can make out everything on the screen. I thought it was going to be really grainy at 1080p 60, but it seems to be working quite well. And what is most interesting is that I'm flying into the sun, and when you fly into the sun with the Neo, the image doesn't look good. When you fly away from the sun, as I'm doing here, it looks better. So the only benefit of filming in 1080p 60 is that your file sizes are much smaller than if you filmed at 4K 30. So if you don't want to use up a lot of the memory space that's on the drone, since it's only 22 gigs, then film in a lower resolution like 1080p 30 or 1080p 60. Now let me show you what happens when your battery power runs low and you're in manual mode. The first thing that will happen is your drone will become unresponsive and attempt to crash itself, but if you have some skills, you can save it. You've got to get it back to you quickly. GPS return to home does not kick in, at least it didn't kick in my case, so I limped it back to me as best I could. It keeps wanting to land, it's running out of power. I'm trying to push it forward at full speed. This is as fast as I can get it going, trying to limp it all the way back to me. It's not doing well. You can see the voltage on the lower right of the screen. Using all my efforts, the best I could do is get it to land in the grass right in front of me. But, you know, if you were far away, your drone is going down and you may not find it. So you want to keep it close to you when the battery's low. All right, so I put a new battery back in here. We're going to fly one more battery. I'm going to double tap, power this baby on. Now, in order to fly with the Motion Controller 3 and not the remote, just make sure you turn the remote off. You can see there's no lights on it. I've turned that off. Now I'm going to turn this on because only one should be connected at a time or it gets confused. To start the motors, press the orange button twice. And to take off, just hold down the orange button and the Neo will rise. If you tilt the motion controller up, the Neo will look up. If you tilt the motion controller down, the Neo will look down. If you pull in the trigger while tilting your wrist to the left or the right, you will cause the Neo to spin. To fly the Neo forward, you just have to pull the trigger in and aim the circle you see on your screen at the location you wish to go. In my opinion, flying the Neo with the Motion Controller 3 is way better than flying with joysticks. For beginners to drones, flying is much more intuitive and you can pretty much do some pretty cool things. And your recorded image is very stable. I'm just showing you what I see in my FPV goggles, but as you see here on the screen, this is the recorded image and it's very smooth. Now, since the DJI Goggles 3 has head tracking built in, that means when you turn it on, the Neo has head tracking. Head tracking allows you to look in any direction and the camera will turn in the same direction. This can be very scary for beginners, so it's best to practice flying the Neo for a couple of weeks before you try head tracking. So with head tracking, you can fly the drone forward while looking to the left or the right. Sometimes it's useful as you fly near things, you can look over at them while you're flying by them. You can also use head tracking to look up or down as you're flying over objects in a straight line. Another benefit of flying with the motion controller is that you can switch on Easy Acro. When flying, you select which trick you wish to perform by turning the dial on the left-hand side of the motion controller. And to select the trick, just push the dial inward. Then when you fly, use the joystick to cause the Neo to perform the trick in whichever direction you wish. As an example, look at the left-hand side of my screen and you'll see me select 180 drift. Here's an example of the 180 drift. The drone will spin 180 degrees as it passes me and then drift backwards. And I'll do it one more time. Now if you look at my screen on the left, I'm going to select flip. And now if I move the joystick on the motion controller in whichever direction I desire, the drone will flip in that direction. And to land the Neo, double tap the orange button twice on the motion controller. So what are my final thoughts on the Neo flying FPV? Well, I think it's really good. I think it is really good. Now, it's going to be difficult for many of you to justify buying yourself a set of these goggles when you paid next to nothing for this. And now this is going to cost you more than this. I don't think a lot of people are going to do it, but those people who already own the Goggles 3, like in a Nevada or something like that, then you might, if you own this, then you might fly it FPV. But I'm going to say most people with a Nevada might not even buy this, so I don't know. Given the size of this thing, it's very fun to fly with the joysticks in normal and sport mode, but in manual mode, it does not behave like a proper FPV drone. Most DJI FPV drones, even the Avata, they're kind of wimpy in their tuning in FPV, but we get used to it. But a lot of pros that are people that fly FPV drones all the time, they don't buy DJI products to fly FPV unless it's already in a drone like an O3 system or the new O4 system coming out. Yeah, but for many other people like myself, I like DJI products, so I will fly them and put up with some of the problems. Now, flying this with the motion controller is a blast. It's tiny, you're not going to injure yourself or anybody else because it's so small. So I think most people will probably get the motion controller because the motion controller is pretty sweet with this tiny little drone for buzzing it around indoors or outdoors. And if you're wondering if you can fly this indoors with the motion controller, yes you can. I've done it already. When I connected this the first time, I flew it around my house. Super simple to fly. I don't think I have any footage here. Or if I do, I'll show you some footage right now as I'm talking, flying it around the house. Very, very simple to fly. You can even put the head tracking on while you're flying around the house. It's that easy. All right, guys, with all the activity happening here, I am going to call it a day. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have questions on the little Neo FPV or flying it normal, go watch my other video. The picture of the other video is up here. Then post your questions below and I will get back to you. For now, I say thanks for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. I will put links to the Neo below. You can go find it for yourself. And I will catch you in a future video with many more cool product reviews. Until then, I say bye.